Answer to that gentleman's question, is there a chemistry-based LLM? Yes, there's a bio-LLM now. It's quite popular these days in terms of chemistry, but thank you so much. I think kudos to AIM, Fractal and Genpact for keeping this bigger show. I think you're all interested to know what's happening in the world of AI. I would not delve into business because frankly, there are two reasons. I don't know business. The only numbers that I know actually are coming out of a machine. So I only talk to machines, and that's what I'm going to talk about to you as well. Secondly, I think you've heard enough about business, so you want to hear really, really cool stuff in terms of what we are doing. As somebody said, I take care of a research division within Tech Mahindra, and we researchers may have some contrarian views in terms of how the world of business is following up, but one view is pretty clear with us, and that is that India, this is time for India, right? If you have to burn a little bit of cash, please do so. Because that is the time where India is actually making a lot of progress, and we have huge amounts of data. We are a fringe, and when we talk about fringe, we are a society which has got huge amounts of data which can be worked out into AI. So my journey, I've been a researcher all my life. I started off with IBM and started working with Watson. My gray hair will tell you the story. This is 22 years before, and we were very, very happy when Watson won the Jeopardy challenge. We had fists pumping in the air saying, look what we have done. Largely, you know that was really, really a different kind of science. This was more statistical in terms of how language was taken into account. Of course, language has changed over a period of time. Over the past 10 years, which my lab has been, we are very, very proud of some of these cases. I'm just going to pick up this before I talk to you about our LLM story and what we are doing with large language model and where AI really is growing up and what's the next future. All of us have gone through unholy times of COVID. All of us have gotten 2 or 3 vaccines as per our needs. And you know that if, God forbid, COVID strikes or something like this as an epidemic strikes, we have some mechanism to take care of it. While vaccine was being built in India, there was another effort that was going on the other side. This was my lab which was doing this. This is about building therapeutics around COVID. So therapeutics is nothing different. It's like a paracetamol that you eat when you have some, fever or whatever. We are very, very proud that we are responsible for finding the only therapeutic molecule that attacks COVID. And this was done about 1.5 years of research. I may sound very intelligent to you at this time, but I was not when I was doing this. And this was the time when COVID struck. You were all in your houses. We were, in fact, in my lab, we were continuously working for at least 2-3 years while the COVID was on, because obviously we were doing this research. Now, the idea behind therapeutics that we did was, this was the time when Gen AI was not even a word. This is using a lot of genetic algorithms that we did, and what we really found out was, most of you would have heard a story of hydroxychloroquine becoming very popular. Take hydroxychloroquine and suddenly COVID goes away. And Dr. Trump was really responsible for setting up this news saying, please take hydroxychloroquine and COVID would be over. So we were the first ones to debunk this theory. We said that hydroxychloroquine actually reduces the pH level of the body to 7. Which allows you to, the virus not work. But the moment you leave it, suddenly the pH rises and the virus will be active again. And for large parts of people thought that COVID is a lung disorder. We told that this is a vascular disorder. It's a blood disease. It's not a lung disease. The virus actually attaches to the ACE enzyme, which is present in your blood. And that's the reason why sometimes it reaches the lung and the lung has that effect. Now, what did we do? We had no clue of the virus. I'm letting you know in advance. We only knew software virus at that time. So we took some sessions about what a virus is, what a bacteria is, what a bacteriophage is, and we had forgotten all of our biology. The only thing that we knew as researchers was language. And we really found out that viruses themselves have a language, which is the language of amino acids. So we did the first study. We said, can this virus resemble something which has gone in the past? And we really found out that this virus resembles, surprisingly, malaria. The Malarian protozoa, even though it's a parasite, resembles this virus, which is very 2 different fields apart. And that's why you saw these news of chloroquines coming out in the picture. The second thing that we did was, we took 8,000 FDA-based drugs in the market, and we started using genetic algorithms to see which of these drugs would actually attack the virus. These are already known drugs. These are GRAS in the medical terminology, generally recognized as safe drugs, and we started working out these drugs with the virus. And we found 17 were very successful in attacking the virus, including some Ayurvedic drugs, by the way. If people are telling you eat ashwagandha, if people are telling you eat giloy, we did find that there's a molecule called vidaferin A, which is very, very particular in attacking this virus in certain ways. Even though the whole story was narrated in a very different and a complex word. What do you do next, right? We found 17 drugs. We found 17 systems that can attack a virus. Somebody said, why don't we test it in a petri dish, right? In silico, in vitro, why don't we test it? So I remember that time, I was knocking at the NIV door and saying, can I have the virus? And they looked at me up and down and says, who are you? I said, I'm the CIO of Tech Mahindra. They said, so what? So I actually took the virus in my hand. I had the biohazard in my hand. I delivered it to Bangalore, which is one of my teams who were actually doing some testing. We had some teams like Region Biosciences and Indus in Bangalore who were actually doing the testing. And we found out of those 17, 3 were successful in attacking the virus. As researchers and scientists can be sometimes very, very stupid in their thinking, the next question was, should we test it on the lungs? And every one of us said, it's not going to be ours. So somebody said, no, it's going to be somebody that we go to a morgue, take a cadaver out, take the lungs, try and test it in some way. And we did exactly that. We went to the morgue, we took the lungs or the epithelial cells of a dead body, we created a 3D printed bio-lung outside the human body, and we took the capillary action of how the virus would be or how this molecule would attack, because that may cause thrombosis or some kind of blood clots if the molecule is not doing a good capillary action. That gave us the molecule that we very proudly say is the only Indian IT services company to have found a molecule that can attack a therapeutic or can attack the alpha or the beta variant of the molecule, right? So, the reason for me to pick up this slide is to tell you that innovation in general sense does not necessarily mean the area that you work on. It also means a lot of ecosystem combinations with different partners and combination, with different people. I wouldn't go to Bharat Markup Language. I'll tell you what we did over there. Bharat Markup Language, I'll just simply say Bharat Markup Language is a tool where every rural kid can now code in the language of their own choice, be it Punjabi, Marathi, Bengali, Hindi. And when I say code, they can code HTML, they can code CSS, and they can code JavaScript. This is freely available. This is a CSR from our side. We have actually made sure that 150,000 teachers in this country and about lakhs of kids are now trained on this language module, which is freely available. If you go to bhamal.techmahindra.com, you will be able to find out as to what we do over there. India's first meta bank. Do you know which is India's first meta bank? Well, a lot of people talk about West and the Western banks. India's first meta bank is a public service bank. And the public service bank is Union Bank of India. Union Bank of India went live with its first metaverse in 2021, about 2 or 3 years back, which was built by my team. Today also, if you happen to go to unionbankofindia.com website, you can use your phone number and you will enter into the metaverse lounge. Of course, this was the moment of Me Too metaverse. Everybody wanted to do metaverse as well, but the bank had a very specific ask. The bank's ask was, can I get the millennials and zennials to come to my bank and not see me as a 100-year-old bank and see me as a very new bank in terms of what we do. If you are from a farming community, 140 million farmers in this country use an app that is built by my team. It's called Atmanirbhar Krishi. Atmanirbhar Krishi was delivered by the Prime Minister in 2021-22, and this app really works on Android phone, and it's the only app which talks about soil health card. There is no app in the world that talks about a soil health card. And you know the problem for agriculture in India? The problem for agri in India is one substantial problem is you don't have large land holdings. Farmers have very small land holdings. It's about an acre as compared to West. So you have to be point precise in telling the farmer that if you open this app in the land that you stand, you would see soil health card, NDVI, precipitation value, and so many other parameters that we do. Of course, Dr. Pramod was here. We've had a chat with ISRO. This is ISRO's data as well, which is obviously coming in over there. All right, so this is just to get the premise. Any one of you know what this is? If you could raise your hands. Okay, one hand. Do you know this is India's own large language model? Built by a large company, right? So, okay, so there's a story behind this. Sam Altman was here in 2021-22. He gave a challenge. Can India build a large language model in less than $10 million? Well, we managed to do in $400,000. Right. So that's frugality. But we didn't go to the other routes. Right? We didn't go through the routes of saying, look, I will pick up Hindi, I will pick up Bengali, I will pick up Gujarati. We saw that India is a land of 24 mother tongues and 1645 dialects officially. Unofficially, this country speaks 19,200 dialects. 19,200 dialects, out of which some of them have gotten extinct, are in the endangered list. So we thought, if we have to make a large language model, or whatever you want to say about a language, India will only get hit if the dialect gets hit. It's not going to be about Hindi only. It's going to be variations of Hindi. It's going to be Dogri. It's going to be languages like Panch Pargania. It's going to be languages like Angika. Most of you are shaking your head. You've never heard of this. I had never heard when I started looking at Hindi as well, right? So what I did was, and I think one of the biggest problems with India is there's no data. The number of tokens available for each language is so less. When I started working out, the only language token available to me from a Hindi perspective were 2.8 billion. Of course, now it has increased. How do you make a large language model in billions of parameters if you do not have that many tokens available for yourself? You've got to collect data, right? So if you notice this, we launched the first Indus model last year. It is 1.2 billion parameters, a small effort from our side. We took Hindi and 37 of its dialects, and the model is actually benchmarked on Intel Xeon servers. It's not a GPU. It's an Intel Xeon server, which is a CPU. You can work on it, right? Even if, let's say, for example, Intel was showing you about AI PCs over there, our model runs on AI PCs as well. So the idea behind this frugality in terms of the parameters, right? We are not in a race of saying we're building 175 billion parameters, because most of my research over the last 20 years in language says after 3 billion to 4 billion parameters, the model knows the language. It's all about now making sure that you get the bragging rights of bringing 175 billion or whatever, and these are tougher and bigger models. But that's what it really does. Now, how do we collect data, right? This is the map of India where all of Hindi is spoken, or variations of Hindi is spoken. Now, this is spoken by villagers. This is spoken by people in the rural sector. So we actually did a kind of Buddhist mission. My teams were sent to all of these places. We made a Bhasha Dan portal. And we went and talked to each farmer, to each person, wherever he or she is, and tell them, please, please, please speak in this recorder. We will give you the context of the Hindi word or the sentence. Please speak in your own language. And try and make it as much as your own language is, right? So if it's Angika, don't try and speak Bihari or Magahi. Please stick to Angika and try and speak that. If it's going to be Dogri, please speak in Dogri only. Don't mix Hindi and Punjabi words into it, right? So there was a big effort that we did over the last 6 months when we were building this model. And that data really got us a lot of information about dialects. We are probably the only team that has got the largest dialect collection of data from all of India in terms of how Indian Hindi language is being spoken across. Now, obviously, we made tools along the way. One of the problems with data is a lot of bias. And when we looked at data coming from open source, there were hundreds of biases. There were 12, we categorized them into 12 sectors: violence, racial discrimination, discrimination against disabled. Those are the biases that you have to cut out. Now, there is no human way that I could have done this in less than 100 years. So I had to write some codes. I had to write some more machine learning systems. So we actually made a lot of toolkits. We made toolkits that can find biases in your data, which were accurate to about 70%. And that data got filtered in. I collected about 1 terabyte of data, but the data that I used was only 22 GB. So that was the amount of data that I had to cut back just because of the biases, right? So it's not an easy section. There's a data flywheel, of course, which is connected to it. But this effort of ours got noticed by a lot of countries. And lo and behold, it's not just India which is working on Sovereign LLM. There are countries in Southeast Asia who have now taken the lead. All of them now want to build large language models which are for their country, with their data, hosted in the country itself, also talks about their culture, also is aware of the biases in their culture, and is aligned with that country's vision. So the era of sovereign LLM has just started. You would find out there are hundreds of countries now who are trying to build this. India is not just one. And you will be surprised that there are smaller countries now in Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia, countries like Malaysia, which are actually now trying to pour in money to build some of this for their own people, right? So this is where our system did. We actually built, or we are building and will be launched next month, the first sovereign LLM for Indonesia, which is actually built in Bahasa. This is a big model. It's about an 8 GB to 9 GB parameter model. It's actually trained on the entire NVIDIA stack of NeMo. I don't want to go into the stack of NeMo itself, but the stack really gives me some benefits and advantages. There's also a lot of guardrails that have been put behind the model to ensure that it does not talk about anything except Indonesia. So if you ask this model the question that, who's the Prime Minister of India, the model at the back knows the answer, but will never spew it out. Because the question is not about Indonesia, right? It'll be very, very contextual. It'll also be contextual in terms of ethical and racial biases that are taken into account in Indonesia, and not Indian contextual and racial biases, right? So that's something that we are doing, which is good, and this is the race. These are areas where each and every country is now trying to build up a sovereign LLM in their own indigenous languages. If you look at Australia, Australia is trying to build it not in English, but in Aborigines. If you look at New Zealand, New Zealand is trying to build it in Maori, just to attract the sector of Maori people to get into the digital realm. Of course, Southeast Asia is brimming with this activity. There's a lot of activity in Middle East. Middle East wants to do it in Arabic, but Arabic has different flavors in which you speak Arabic as well. And of course, then there is some movement happening in UK as well in terms of what we're doing. All right, so I think this is what we find the difference. Project Indus was built in $400,000 as opposed to Sam Altman's challenge of $10 million, has these parameters. But if you notice the sovereign LLMs are going to be slightly bigger in size. They're going to be using GPUs which are more intensive, obviously the Hoppers, the H100s, etc. But they're also going to be using some frameworks, right? So NVIDIA's NeMo framework, NVIDIA is a good partner, and you should all wait for the next month when we are trying to launch Indus 2.0 with NVIDIA, where we are actually going to make it state-of-the-art in terms of Hindi and also some of the dialects that we are actually going to come up with, right? So obviously, Indus was an open source mechanism. I actually raised this model just to create awareness and just to tell the world that, look, India can do it. If we can send a satellite to Mars in less than half the cost of an auto, we can also build LLMs in our country, right? And we can build LLMs at a cheaper price as well. All right. No training here. The scientist flavor suddenly comes in, but you'll have to stop me. I won't show you equations. But I think from a real easy perspective, I think you are going through this mode at this point. Everybody is building pre-training. Everybody is taking a base LLM. What a base LLM does is it basically predicts the next word. So if you say, is the world flat? If it's not trained, it's not aligned, it's going to spew out some crap. It's going to say, okay, the flatness around the world is limited to your own thinking or something else, right? You may not even recognize the answer. What we really do is we do supervised fine-tuning, which is the process of the act where we make sure that we give some question and answers to the model to make sure that it answers it correctly. And then we do an alignment. And the alignment is basically asking questions and saying a yes or a no prompt, right? So we say, is pineapple on pizza a crime? So the answer could be, okay, collect human AI feedback onto it and say, no, adding pineapple on pizza is not a crime, it's a preference. If it's a right answer, say yes. If it's not. And this goes back into the model. And that's a technique where a lot of people say RLHF or reinforcement learning through human feedback, where you essentially utilize it. But there's a problem. I told you I'll show only one equation. RLHF, which is the equation that is on the top. I won't go into details. We use Kubert-Leibert divergences, but RLHF is notoriously unstable. The reinforcement learning path through a human feedback is notoriously unstable. It doesn't converge sometimes. It needs a separate, it makes 3 LLMs to be trained to actually get to RLHF. There was a paper from Stanford. Stanford said, and the scientists in Stanford said, that you can use direct preference optimization, which is the second one, and you can reduce one model, and you can still get the same results. We use this today. What this model says, and I can explain in, on a one-to-one basis, what this model basically encodes is your preference directly. So if I say India's per capita income is 320 rupees per annum, you are the right people to decide whether it is wrong or right. Some of you may say very wrong, some of you may say wrong, some of you may even say right, yes. That is your preference. But a larger preference is obviously no. The model takes that preference and puts it back into this as a reward system, and that is what trains the model faster. So one of the things that we want to do with AI, and one of my research mechanism, is how can AI become less compute intensive? Because if the upper model is applied, AI becomes compute intensive, and that's why you're causing a lot of cost in terms of the model. Where is AI headed? Is my last point of view. Everybody will tell you that AI is now headed towards agents. If you go to a Salesforce event, they'll say we've got Dreamforce now as agents. If you go to any other company, they'll say, look, we are working on AI agents as well. Yes, you are, and these agents are right. For an untrained person, these agents are nothing better than an RPA. So if an untrained eye looks at these agents, you'll say it's a robotic process automation. It's obviously the engineers who actually built this. They know it's actually AI, which is working behind the scenes. But AI still confuses a lot. It's still stupid. There are a lot of places where we have found that AI does not give you a commonsensical answer, whereas us human beings have that kind of common sense. What should we do to make AI better? And how do we make agents better? Is one of the researches that we are doing. I'm just putting you on the slide a paper, which is an original paper from Hu and Shimduba, which is basically talking about that the reason why AI is not able to answer commonsensical questions, even today, even when Sam Altman releases the fact that I'm going to be AGI compliant in next 2 to 3 years, the reason is that the AI does not present or does not have a world in itself. It does not know the world. Have you seen the meme that says OpenAI or ChatGPT answers this question wrong? How many R's are there in the strawberry? You've seen those memes? You know why that's the reason? Strawberry has 3 R's. But when you give sometimes to these models, some of these models will come back saying it's got 2 R's. Some of them will say, no, it's got 3 R's. The reason for that is Gen AI is a probabilistic mechanism, and it only breaks words into half tokens. It doesn't know what the next token really means unless it combines it. And as a result of that, it makes commonsensical mistakes. Number one. Number two, the AI system does not know what a strawberry is. We humans know it's a fruit. It's a fruit that when eaten gives you a little tingly feeling if it's sour, can be sweet, can be converted into a jam as well, can be spread on a piece of bread. AI doesn't know this. And that's a result, AI makes these commonsensical mistakes as well. And of course, we've been taught the spellings of this thing. What this paper does, and for any budding scientists who want to do this, right, and that's what India's story should be about, they allowed AI to dream the world that is getting in, and then make the next decision. Right? It's about saying to AI, can you dream about yourself? Can you dream the question that I've asked? Once you develop your dream, now come back to life and start working with the life that you have, which is the physical part of the life that we're looking at, right? So that's the model that we have actually been building. It's called min-max regret model rather than a reward model. It's also called a dreaming model of AI. It's also called a waker model of AI. How do you wake up an AI system just like humans do? A lot of the data that you collect today, or a lot of your information still resides at the back of the hippocampus, which is your memory. And as a result of that, you pull out that memory when you have to cycle. Nobody trains you to cycle after your childhood. The moment you get a pedal, you're on it. Right? The reason is it's somewhat stored, and that subconsciously comes out of the system. So that's the waker model. And this is the extension for those current models that we're doing. That's the regret model that we are actually working on. any one of you is interested, that's the real growth of AI in the next future. If you see the regret, it says, I would go to the path which is the minimum regret path rather than the maximum reward path. Because the regret is something that you dream. Reward is something that you get and you want to achieve, right? So that's the whole idea of this model that really gets in. But I want to end this talk, and I want to be a little bit contrarian to the view, saying, look, this is the time for India. India has to get into research and development. India has to produce something which is not aping the West. India will have to produce its own R&D, and you are all here to help and support me to get to that R&D level. Thank you. If you've got any questions.
Can we have the lights in the audience on, please? As usual, if you have a question, hand up in the air. There's someone's hand up in the air, but he's calling someone else from the door. So, not him, definitely. He's looking at you, sir. I thought you had a question. Okay, go there.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful session. So my question to you is, myself Pratik Desai, I am a faculty of data science at NMIMS University School. So my question to you is, because you have worked, you said in even the Watson project at IBM, you said that, and now you're working with these LLMs, which are generative AI. Once upon a time, Watson also did a lot of sound bites around Watson. So Watson was going to solve cancer and many other things, but it did not turn up like that, although it won the Jeopardy game.
Yes.
And Watson had an advantage that it was quite more symbolic than the current language models, which are completely statistical. And today we are talking about generative AI and LLMs, but those are just spouting out the next token, as you said, without understanding the world. It does not have a world model. So do you see another, after this hype cycle, will we see, because many sessions today say that now AI will solve healthcare and do the drug discovery and all, but if it does not understand how many R's there are in a strawberry, it does not seem that we are going to get there soon. So do you see, do you have also proposed a model, max min regret model? And I too have read some research papers which says that we have to combine this neural network model with symbolic model, and maybe neuro-symbolic models will be the future of AI. So I wanted your take on all these things. Thank you.
No, you're bang on target, Pratik. I think AI is just at the tip of the iceberg. I think we go into this hype cycle pretty often. At one point in time, it was all AI and machine learning. And so we were telling people what is the difference between machine learning and AI. Now we're telling the people what is the difference between Gen AI and AI. God forbid there's a world that we come in and we say now the difference between quantum and AI. Right? So this is a world that continues to happen. I think from a science perspective or from real research perspective, I do believe that we're still not there. Having catered to language is great. I think Chatgpt was a revelation for all of us, because I think for the first time we could have an AI system converse in a language that we thought, right? Conversations earlier were not that good in terms of what we were doing. However, having said that, you're absolutely right. There is I would not call it neurosymbolic. I think for a lot of people it will be very difficult to understand what you mean by neurosymbolic. I think when AI developed after 1956, it developed into two modes. One was a symbolic world and one was a connectionist world. The connectionist world are the world of neural networks that we say is the current AI, will be the current AI. The symbolic world somehow lost its meaning, but language was first catered only by symbolics, right? So if I was to call you a word called crab, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a word called crab. What does your brain think? Crab is a crab, you find it on sands. I have taken my family and suddenly a new thought would occur saying, kabhi to khaya bhi tha. I have eaten crab at that place is pretty good, right? If I tell you a word called kavuras, how many of your neurons have subsided? Who knows this word, kavuras? Well, you would never know this unless you know Greek. It's crab in Greek. Symbolism, right? So symbolics was the only way in which language appeared at some point in time. Suddenly the language took a hit after Jeffrey Hinton showed that neural networks can do it. And of course they did it to a certain extent, but we're still not there. You're absolutely right. There's enough to be done. India can take that lead, and I've been pushing this story from my side saying, look, if you can get into actual research and development, business is one side, and I will not talk about it. I can't talk about it. But if you can really talk about research and development and science progression, India can really take a lead in terms of doing what we do.